Welcome to week 3 of the course. Lesson 2 analyzed how peace parks are created and outlined 4 main stages for developing and managing these areas. In Lesson 3, we will focus on the challenges and lessons learned in peace park management. Remember that natural resources are often key factors in either the emergence of conflicts or their resolution. There are several challenges associated with trying to establish a peace park in post-conflict areas. For example, wealth sharing is one of the fundamental issues that can determine the success or failure of a peace agreement. Other significant challenges for creating and maintaining peace parks in post-conflict areas are related to the following. First, garnering political goodwill and trust. Then we have ensuring equal benefits, establishing priorities, ensuring external support. Another challenge is overcoming the misconception of the loss of state sovereign rights over peace parks. The establishing of a peace park implies greater cooperation, leading to enhanced collaboration and even joint decision-making between participating countries. However, it is important to make it clear that each country retains full sovereignty and all the rights and responsibilities regarding the peace park in its territory. UN Environment's Environmental Cooperation for Peace Building program has developed a series of lessons learned and best practices to deal with conflict and natural resources in peace building effort. The program has launched the Environmental Peace Building Knowledge Platform and Community of Practice. The program also devised 12 strategies for mediating natural resources in a peace negotiation. 1. Address natural resource issues in a manner suited to their role in the conflict. 2. Use potential benefits from natural resources as an incentive to keep parties at the negotiating table. 3. Establish mechanisms or institutions to address resource issues in the future. 4. Consider different options to address ownership claims. 5. Address natural resource governance. 6. Design appropriate wealth sharing provisions. 7. Establish a technical track on natural resources with the broader political negotiation. The next is consider optimal timing of natural resource negotiation within a broader peace negotiation. Include an appropriate level of detail regarding natural resource provisions. Use natural resources and the environment as confidence-building measures in the implementation of a peace agreement. Consider complementary dialogue or consultation processes. And finally, use indirect provisions on natural resources when direct provisions are not possible. Apart from environmental and natural resource challenges, the legal systems of countries, their law enforcement capabilities, and governance norms often present significant challenges in peace park establishment and management, regardless of whether conflict is present or not. The 3 of the most common legal challenges associated with the establishment of peace parks are limited legal and policy capability, long protracted processes associated with amendments of legal and policy instruments, and different interpretations and institutional responses to legal and policy implementation requirements. The extent of political commitments from each country is a key element in determining what types of policy and legal instruments will work best. IUCN recommends using available international, regional, and local legal and policy instruments, as well as considering new ones. Maintaining policy support from higher levels of governance through a memorandum of understanding or a binding agreement helps establish the legitimacy of transboundary cooperation. Informal agreements are also useful and may evolve into more formal arrangements. Directly linked to legal challenges are law enforcement challenges. This is particularly prevalent in cases where legislation or policies, for example wildlife trade, are different between the participating countries. Other times, law enforcement is hindered by difficulties in assessing certain remote territories. Some common law enforcement challenges include topographical limitations such as inaccessible terrain or remoteness, separate independent communication networks, language differences, conflict in resource management policies, and uneven resource availability. The effective implementation of law enforcement activities depends on a firm foundation of institutional competencies and functions. The following are some of the best practice elements to ensure effective law enforcement in peace parks. Number 1. Strong leadership from senior protected area managements. Number 2. regular review of law enforcement strategies. Number 3, permanent monitoring and information collection. And finally, effective communications and transportation. As shown in Lesson 2, it is necessary to determine the type of governance when establishing a peace park. Peace park governance presents major institutional design and implementation challenges. Transboundary protected area governance engages not only local level institutions, but also regional and international level institutions. Some specific governance-related challenges to peace park creation include challenges integrating government officials into decision-making processes, difficulty with new members or partner organizations understanding group norms and processes that have developed, difficulty sustaining interest or membership, challenges translating shared visions into annual or multi-year work plans, challenges keeping nearby communities, etc. The three main features of good transboundary conservation governance are: number 1, it is increasingly collaborative. This means engaging with many stakeholders from the involved countries. Number 2, it is increasingly nested, in that distinct but linked systems of governance operate at various levels of social organization. Number 3, it is increasingly adaptive. It is based on the premise that uncertainty is a given, and that social, economic, and environmental variables change, landscapes evolve, and unanticipated impacts occur. As shown in case study 1 of this lesson, cross-border management is highly beneficial, but also presents environmental, socioeconomic, cultural, and regional integration challenges, with logistical challenges at each level. Cooperation is a defining feature of transboundary conservation and key to overcome issues. In order for a peace park to be successful, the countries involved must agree on the technical details necessary for long-term success. Creating a binational or trinational management committee is a common way of ensuring the participation of all parties involved. These committees usually develop joint management plans, which vary depending on the characteristic of the peace park. The following elements ensure that best practices are applied when planning and managing peace parks. First, start small. Developing a prioritized list of common management objectives can be helpful for determining mutual interests for furthering cooperation. Partners should be realistic when deciding what needs to be done and what can be done in order to avoid future frustration. Determine who is accountable for each task, as well as timeframes for implementation and measures of achievement, all of which are relevant to a monitoring and evaluation framework. Number 3, ensure stakeholder engagement. In many parts of the world, protected areas are seen as marginal to other areas of policy, such as forestry and agriculture. Only planning that fully involves all the relevant actors is likely to be successful in the long term, though it may often be more expressive and initially complex. And lastly, use different approaches. In some cases, top-down approaches will work. In others, bottom-up approaches or third-party involvement will generate more success. A combination of different approaches may often be the best way to establish an effective cooperative framework. Communication plays a key role in implementing management plans. It helps consolidate values as well as establish multicultural and multisectoral dialogue regarding natural areas. There are several challenges regarding communication in protected area management. For example, communication is not effectively established or practiced. Within institutions, there is little policy support which values communication. Communication is generally marginalized and comes into play at the end of decision-making processes. And lastly, there are no adequate resources allocated to communication and education objectives. It is necessary for the Peace Park to have a communication plan as part of the management plan, which will need to consider specific audiences, messages, and channels. For example, messages and communication channels will not be the same for Peace Park visitors and the staff. Different audiences require different information that is often conveyed through different media. Best practices in communication and protected area management include: first, from the beginning, initiate education and communication included into the planning and implementation processes for the areas through policies, programs, and projects. Number 2, provide spaces for communication to function at all levels in the technical and decision-making structures of institutions. Number 3, assign sufficient economic resources and administrative support to communication and education. And lastly, make efforts to continuously develop research initiatives and explore support for the management of education and communication strategies. Securing financial sustainability is another key element for the long-term success of a Peace Park. It will often require innovative approaches for income generation and funding. The following are some strategies for doing so. First, raise awareness. To ensure financial sustainability, it is important to raise awareness of the benefits of transboundary conservation to policymakers, decision makers, and donors. It is most effective to consider and treat funders not as donors, but as investors. An excellent way to do this is to clearly communicate the dividends delivered by their investment. Number 2, set up environmental trust funds. Transboundary environmental trust funds and other third-party institutions can raise needed resources and deliver them where they're needed most. This is particularly useful between countries with various stages of development, power, and capacities. Number 3, align with other goals. We have already mentioned this in Lesson 1. Aligning transboundary initiatives with national, regional, or global goals, such as those established through the Convention on Biological Diversity, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and the Paris Climate Accord, is a wise strategy to assess funding streams from multilateral and bilateral donors who allocate funds specifically for this purpose. Next, integrate biodiversity. Integrating biodiversity into other sectors, such as forestry, fisheries, agriculture, or tourism, is important for achieving nature conservation goals. And lastly, identify beneficiaries of ecosystems, goods, and services. Identifying the beneficiaries of the ecosystem's goods and services produced by a particular transboundary region may generate broad-based support from funders, governments, and other stakeholders. However, some practitioners caution against placing a dollar value on conservation because this approach may lead to more development rather than conservation due to the economic value of alternative scenarios. With this, we want to leave you with 4 key takeaways for addressing challenges related to peace parks. Number 1, determine the conflict and the best strategies for environmental peace building before establishing a peace park. If the peace park is established in a post-conflict area, it is important to identify the main challenges to be overcome, as well as the most appropriate strategies for dealing with issues related to disputed natural resources. Number 2, identify potential legal, law enforcement, and governance challenges and apply best practices to overcome them. The extent of political commitment from each country is a key element in determining what types of policy and legal instruments will work best in transboundary conservation. The transboundary conservation governance considered as best practice is increasingly collaborative, nested, and adaptive. Number 3, determine which elements could hinder or strengthen the cooperative management of a peace park and address them. 4 overarching best practices when planning and managing peace parks include: start small, determine who is accountable for the implementation of specific tasks, engage stakeholders at all levels of governance, and use different approaches, top-down, bottom-up, or third-party involvement. Lastly, number 4, identify strategies for securing financial sustainability of the peace park. This is a key element for the success of a peace park over the long term and will often require innovative approaches to income generation and funding. This can be achieved through raising awareness, setting up environmental trust funds, aligning the peace park with other goals, integrating biodiversity into other sectors, and identifying the beneficiaries of the ecosystem's goods and services produced by the peace park. We hope that the challenges and lessons learned discussed in this lesson provide insight to practitioners throughout the world, whether they're working in existing peace parks or advocating for their creation. Keep in mind that addressing the issues on the ground requires not only resources and capacity, but also a great deal of creativity and will. The examples provided throughout this module will hopefully be a source of inspiration for the future creation and management of peace parks around the globe.